My name is Jerry Gill. Today is May 13th, 2010. I'm visiting with Sandy Fischer here on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project, which is part of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Sandy, thank you for taking time to come and visit with us. Appreciate you doing that.
Oh, no problem.
Well, I want to just tick off a few things here, Sandy. These are just very few of your accomplishments, but you're a legend in OSU softball. 23-year coaching career at Oklahoma State University, more than 900 wins, 9 conference championships, 6 College World Series appearances, voted Midwest Region Coach of the Year 5 times, National Coach of the Year in 1989, coached 26 All-Americans. In 2008, you were inducted into the National Fast Pitch Coaches Hall of Fame. Yeah. Wow.
I know.
Have I left anything out, Sandy?
Yeah, it's been fun.
What a ride.
Yes.
But let me step back a minute, though. First of all, kind of start with the beginning. Can you share a little bit about where you grew up, your family, and your early life?
Sure. I grew up in Quincy, Illinois, on a farm, a small farm, and I had an older brother and an older sister. And it was through the experience of my older brother that I got into the sport of softball. We both belonged to 4-H clubs. He was a softball pitcher for the boys team.
Okay.
And then I helped create at the age of 10 a softball team for the 4-H club I belonged to and became the pitcher. So it was through my association with my brother and playing catch in the backyard that my love of the sport began.
Okay. Now, your older brother, do you have any other brothers or sisters?
No.
The two of you?
Okay. I had an older brother and an older sister.
Okay. Now, you grew up on a farm?
Yes.
Is that right? And what did your dad, did he also in his occupation have another job other than just farming, or was it pretty much farming?
It was a small farm, so he also was a school bus driver.
Okay.
He drove morning and night, and then later on my mother and father owned a laundromat together and worked that along with the farm. And then later in life, my mother became a minister.
Your mother?
Yes, at a Unity Church in St. Louis. So.
And again, what church was it, you say?
It was the Unity, Church of Unity.
Church of Unity?
Small church in St. Louis, later down the road after I graduated from college.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very neat.
What, you might have given me a clue here, but I was going to say, growing up, were there some principles and values, that you learned that influenced you and contributed to your success later in life?
I think my mother instilled in me more a sense of wonder and possibility about the world, because if all things are possible, then you're not narrow-minded. You don't put things in a box or a square, and you look at the world with a wide open view. And so I appreciate that, be it a plant blooming or be it just some change in government or the universe or something. I mean, it's just, there's always a possibility about something. So it was a very cool thing, a philosophy.
What can you tell me about your other school community activities there at Quincy?
Well,
involved in other sports or other organizations?
No, unfortunately, growing up in my high school situation, we had no sports. It hadn't started yet. A little bit of intramural type of stuff, but I played in the band, and my mother wanted me to desperately play the piano or do dance lessons or whatever. I had no interest. I just wanted to be a farm girl and play with my horse and play softball. That was pretty much what I wanted to do.
So what instrument did you play, Sandy?
I played the French horn and the flute of all things. I know. Marching band, French horn, yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, kind of going back to your farming experience, did you work, it was a working farm, so I guess you got a pretty good dose of work?
Very much a working farm. Got to plow the fields and disc the fields and shuck the corn and feed the pigs and do the whole 9 yards. So it was a very
before school, chores after school.
Yes, bucket feed the calves, that whole thing. So yes, very strong appreciation for the land and for the values and the hard work that farmers do to feed us.
Well, Sandy, get back to your earlier comment about your older brother. I mean, so sort of a two-part question. I mean, did your parents encourage your participation in softball? I mean, it sounds like your brother did for sure.
Well, my brother needed somebody to catch.
Okay.
He wanted to practice. He wasn't really a teaching kind of guy, but he wanted me to help him. So he would pitch to me, and it would hurt, actually. I mean, physically, it was hard because he was very strong, so I tried to throw it back as hard as I could, and so that's how I learned to pitch. But my father was encouraging. He would come to the games, etc. My mother was more of a background person. She wasn't really sure sports were going to be good for women, but she was like, if you like to do it, then you need to go do it. And so I did.
So now, again, the genesis of, so your brother played on a 4-H softball team. He
Yep.
pitched. So you decided that the girls should have a team.
That's right.
So you helped organize that?
I did. I joined a different 4-H club, and I actually went incognito as a 9-year-old, and you weren't really allowed to join till you were 10. So I lied because I really wanted to start a team, and I corralled all my friends and neighbors that I knew that had played in the backyard and different things, and I said, you've got to join this 4-H club because we're going to have a softball team. And so I went to the 4-H leader to ask him, and he said, well, no, we don't have enough people, we don't have equipment. And I said, well, how about if I get a team, you buy us a couple bats and some balls and be our coach? He just kind of laughed. I mean, I was 9 years old. And he said, sure. Well, 2 weeks later, I showed up with 10 girls, and away we went, and he was stuck. He didn't know anything about it, but, we got our little T-shirts, and away we went.
And wasn't it unusual? I mean, I can't think of any 4-H clubs. I grew up in a small community that had 4-H that had any sports teams associated with it. Was that unusual?
The funny thing about it, I think because we were in the rural development areas, that if you got a bunch of kids together and they wanted to play a sport, they found a way for you to do it. But our biggest problem was that there were not age groups. I mean, today you play against an appropriate age group. Mm-hmm. Then, at 10 years old, I'm playing against 18-year-olds. So it could have been extremely dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
But you had from age 10 to 18 to be in 4-H. And so anything went. So any age went.
Huh.
So
and then you didn't wear the hard hats in that area,
no.
right?
No,
Okay.
so it was crazy.
Well, was any other community activities, school or community activities you're involved in? You talk about the band a little bit.
Right.
And of course, working on the farm, you didn't have an opportunity to be involved in a lot of things, but was there any community that you were active in?
Well, I worked part-time after school when I got to high school and did that part-time. I was in medical records, and I filed records and things after school. So I missed out on a lot of after-school activities. But there I would go home and help my dad with whatever he needed on the farm. And then it was dark and time to study and do it all over again. So,
start over.
So band and orchestra and softball in the summers.
Well, obviously, Sandy, you're a competitive athlete at an early age.
At an early age.
Well, what appeals to you about sports, and why do you think you're so competitive? Where'd that come from?
I think from my mother. I think my mom, in spite of the fact that she later in life became a minister, was extremely competitive. We played a lot of family board games at home in the winter for entertainment and things, and she was a tough one.
She played to win.
Yeah, and I wanted to go toe-to-toe. And my brother was competitive. And so we, as a family unit, my sister was not competitive and my dad not so much. But, we had some go-arounds with Monopoly and all kinds of good things like that, So I think it came from that.
How about some highlights of your 4-H softball career? I mean, what kind of teams did you have?
We always finished second in the county.
Oh.
But that qualified us to go to state. And we hardly ever had the hitters to do much at state. But I would always get picked up, luckily, as a pitcher to go with the number one team. You were allowed to pick up several players.
Okay, I see.
So I became a pickup often to go with them to the state tournaments, and they won it several times. So,
did your brother? You said you learned from watching a lot, but did he ever tell you techniques of pitching? Because there's some
little bit
fundamentals to pitching that are very important. Huh?
Yeah, he showed me a few things, but he wasn't that well schooled in it either. He was pretty self-taught. And so basically what I learned from him was the basis was my motion. Just I copied his motion of pitching and different things like that. And actually you'll find your pitches one will be more natural than another based on your body positioning and things. So I learned some things, and then it was actually after I got out of college that I finally found someone who actually showed me different pitches.
that long?
It was that long.
Mercy.
But I could hit my spots.
So what year did you graduate from? Was it
from high school?
Quincy, is that where you graduated?
Yes, Quincy High School, 1970.
1970.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at your resume, you played at Western Illinois.
Yes.
Were women athletes, quote, recruited, end quote, at that time?
Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know they had a softball team until I went to Western. My brother had attended Western, and so it was an hour from home. So it was a smaller school. I didn't want to go to a big school. And so it fit my profile for going to college.
So if I understand, so you selected going to school there that had nothing to do with the softball necessarily?
Yes. And then, so as an elective, my freshman year, I took a softball class, just an activity class, an hour of credit, something fun to do. And I was messing around with one of my friends before one of the classes started. And the class happened to be taught by the softball coach, which I didn't know at the time. And I was pitching on the sidelines, just playing and having fun. And she came over to me and she goes, "I need to see you after class." And I thought I was in trouble. The next thing I know, I'm being told about their softball team and she would like for me to try out and different things like that. So I actually kind of just fell into it there. And then by the end of my third year of competition, which actually was the end of my fourth year of school, I thought I was finished because I didn't play as a freshman. I didn't start playing until I was a sophomore. So I thought at the end of my senior year, I was done. I didn't know I had 4 years to compete and I had only competed 3. So I'm all sad. I mean, I think it's over. And coach comes up to me and asks me if I'd like to play one more year because I'd switched majors and needed an extra semester. And I said, well, I didn't think I could. And she said, well, yes. And I said, well, I don't know that my family can really afford more than the last semester. And she said, what if we give you a talent grant? And I said, what's a talent grant? She said, well, it's a form of a scholarship for athletics. So we could pay your last semester with a talent grant. And that was the beginning of athletic scholarships there. So 1975, 74, 75. So
the 4 years you played then were, what years did you play?
Actually, 71 to 75 is when I played.
Okay, I got you.
Yes.
Well, some highlights of your playing career. Can you tell me? Y'all did pretty well, didn't you?
We did. I don't know what our win-loss record was, but we went to the College World Series 3 out of my 4 years.
With the big schools?
Well, the big schools at that time in college softball were in the Midwest.
Okay.
Northern Iowa, Southwest Missouri State, Illinois State, and Western Illinois. And so the bigger, more competitive, more successful schools. And then my last year, they came out of the Midwest. And then my last year, we started to see Arizona State come in, and a few schools from the West were starting to trickle in. But up until that time, the Midwest had been the real hub for competitive softball.
Did you pitch in the College World Series games?
Yep, 3 times, yes.
What kind of record did you have?
I don't even remember. I just know we finished in the top 4 2 of those 3 times. We finished 5th once. So we finished like 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
You won some and lost some?
Won some and lost some, but we muddled through, and it was double elimination, so it was it was like forever you played. It just you just ran out of gas more than anything.
Kind of had to tie your arm on there.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Oh gosh. So just quickly, some other memories of your student experience at Western Illinois.
Oh, it was wonderful. Made a lot of friends. We traveled on a dime. I mean, it was just one of those things that just really brings a lot of people together because you endure so much. And what I can remember was so strange was our softball season couldn't start until women's basketball was over because we wore their uniforms. So we're out there in these sleeveless little short things, in pretty cold weather, and they really did. They had the one set of uniforms, and basketball didn't start till volleyball was over because they used the uniforms. And so, it was really kind of interesting how close they cut it financially because there just wasn't a lot to go around.
I guess you probably didn't travel a long ways to games either, did you?
No, but the other flip side of that was interesting was that we had 3 teams. We had the varsity, the junior varsity, and then we had like a sub-varsity. And because they were very much into participation, but not so much into spending a lot of money to travel very far for competition. So we just basically traveled around to other schools in the state of Illinois to play. So, and we all went on the same bus. So we put all 3 teams on a bus and went.
So, some of your travel experiences, you went on the bus, and what was your lodging like?
Oh Lord, 4 or 5 to a room, whoever was willing to sleep on the floor, I mean, can you get a cot in that room? Is it big enough? I mean, at least 4 to a room, sometimes 5, and you'd have to flip for different, who got the cot and who didn't, and, different things like that. But there was a lot of hardship, but I don't think we knew any better because we had come out of summer programs or just pickup teams where there was no money anyway. And so to get something paid like your education to play, we didn't care if we slept on the floor. It didn't matter. We were just excited to be on the team.
Speaking of summer leagues, when you were playing in college, did you ever play any summer softball? There's summer leagues for college, or I guess adult league you'd call it.
Yes, we had a travel team in Quincy, Illinois called the Quincy Jets.
Okay.
And they got put together during my high school years. And I was approached to travel with them. And my mother was actually quite adamantly against that. She thought that was a little dangerous. Thought maybe I was a little young to go out with what she deemed strangers on the road and do different things. So after a lot of talking and convincing, she finally let me go. And so I did get to travel, and we went around the state of Illinois and up into Missouri and Kansas and did some different things.
So you continued doing that in college then, after high school as well, for summer league?
A little bit, not so much. There was a little bit of an age limitation on there. So in the summers I worked.
Again?
Again. Yes.
Oh, man. So after you finished there at Western Illinois, you played the Connecticut Falcons, is that right, in the Women's Professional Softball League from 1976 to 79?
Yes. Right? Yes, it was interesting because...
Can you talk about the career?
Well, at the end of my senior year, there was rumor that they were going to try to create a women's professional softball league, which was just beyond me. Because I can remember standing on the field during practice going, if I could only get paid to play this sport, I would just be in heaven. You never ever thought about coaching, none of that. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just submit your resume? Because they're going to do this. And I said, I'm not good enough to play pro. I mean, there's so many good players out there. So she did it for me, and I didn't know it. And so she submitted my name and wrote out all the information.
Your coach?
No, just a friend of mine, one of the athletic trainers
Okay.
who had taken care of me. I'd hurt my back one year, and she said, you need to do this. I'm not that good, no. So actually, I got a phone call. I had been drafted. I didn't even know my name was in the pot. And so I was really excited. But I had just gotten a full-time job as a program director at a YMCA. And my parents worked so hard to put me through college that I just didn't feel right saying goodbye to a full-time job I just got to go play summer softball. So I said no, that I thank you, I'm excited, but no, I can't. I thought that was the end of it. A month later, I get another phone call from a legend in our sport, a true legend in our sport, Joan Joyce. She's the best pitcher.
What's her name again?
Joan Joyce.
Joan Joyce.
She's the best pitcher that's ever lived. She carries all the records. An absolute phenom. And I had seen her play and her team out of Connecticut. And they were called the Ray Betsis Breakettes. And they had won many, 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 many national titles in the amateur women's side of softball. So she called me one day, and I about fell off my chair. I was like, oh, yeah, who is this? Really? Who is this? Who's kidding around with? Don't kid around with me, And she finally convinced me that it was her and that I had been traded since I turned down the pro team in Chicago. They traded me to Connecticut. Now, that team I would want to play for because I knew that team was really, really good. They really wanted to play. So I had this conversation with my mother, of course. And, originally she said, it's too risky and we've got too much invested in your college education. And I agreed. I boo-hooed, but I agreed. And 20 minutes later, she called back. She goes, go for it. She goes, you're young. You'll get another job. She goes, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And so I did, and that's
exciting. So you got this one side. She called back 20 minutes later and did total 180 degrees.
I was so excited. I couldn't hardly stand it. And I didn't like my job anyway, what I was doing. So I was like giddy. So I moved to Connecticut and ended up playing with them for the 4 years that pro league was in existence. And we won it all 4 years.
And that's where you learned to pitch?
Well, that's where I learned the mechanics of pitching was from a legend, was from Joan Joyce. And
wow.
And I started out just as green and nervous and bad. I was bad the first couple months until she convinced me I was good. And there was this transition in me of confidence and the ability to learn some things and apply them. So it was really a good thing for me.
Did you play a position as well as pitching when you weren't?
Not so much. No, I tried in my other years to try to play some outfield, etc. I just never was fast enough. I was a pitcher. I hit a little, but I was a pitcher. Yeah.
So you pitched for 4 years in the league. What do you remember? Kind of what your record was, or how, it seems like it probably progressed as you're telling me. It got a little better as you went along.
Yeah, actually, we had 4 or 5 pitchers on our team, and we played 100, 120 game seasons.
Wow.
And so each of us really, I had 3 out of 4 seasons that were over 20 win seasons. I know that, and 20-4 and 20-6 and 20 so forth. But good enough to get us where we were going. So
how many teams were there in that league?
The league started with 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to 8 because some failed financially, and then it kind of went to 6. And it was just a hard thing for them to last. And then in the very, very end, the last year, we were actually down to 4 teams. But our team survived because we were owned by sports greats. Our ownership came from Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova,
wow,
and Sally Little, and some of the pro golfers. And so between pro golf and pro tennis, Joan Joyce had met them on the series. What was that? What was that series? Battle of the Stars or whatever, the Superstars series on TV where they had female athletes competing. And so she met them there and they started talking philosophically why our sport hadn't gone pro. And the Pro League was born out of those discussions with other professional athletes.
What would be a typical attendance for one of your games, home games?
One of our games, we were in Meriden, Connecticut, so it was a mid-sized community. So our home games, we'd have 1,000 people, 1,500 people maybe on it, and on the best nights probably 2,000. But during the week, a weeknight, that kind of thing, 500 to 800 probably.
Do you remember some of the other teams in the league?
Gosh, we had teams in St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, up in New England, Buffalo, New York, and of course in Connecticut. We had San Jose, we had a team up in Edmonton, Canada, down in San Diego. So these teams were all over the United States.
You did pretty extensive traveling then.
We did. When we started out, when we had either 10 teams or 8 teams, we would just travel in our half of the country and kind of contain it, and then do one trip to the West Coast, that kind of thing. So we traveled a lot by bus and by vans, and we flew occasionally.
Could you live on the salary that you were paid? I mean, do you remember what your salary was?
Oh yeah, sure. I thought I'd hit it, $2,300 for the summer.
A summer?
Yes.
Not a month, summer.
No, for the whole summer.
Oh, okay.
But they paid our apartment. So we had we had to pay our own food, but they gave us a place to stay in $2,300, and I thought I'd hit it. I thought I'd hit the jackpot.
What did you do in the off season then?
Well, in the off season, because I had quit my job, I decided to go to Michigan State and pursue a master's degree in intramural administration. So one of the 2 universities in the country, because I wanted to be close to sports. So I thought if I became an intramural director at a university, then I could do some good that way and have some fun, and it'd be a fun job. So I went there to get my master's degree in the off season, and that worked out really well.
Some kind of small stipend for you there as you were working in your graduate program.
Well, I paid my own way for the first semester, hoping to land a graduate assistantship. And I did get one in intramurals, but it wasn't enough. And then at the end of my first semester, I thought, I'm not sure I could do this financially because it was out-of-state tuition and all of that. So I was actually planning on leaving and trying to get back there someday, but I couldn't afford it. So I have packed, my car is packed, I've given up my apartment, I'm at the last day of my job at the intramural building, and a softball player walks by. Now this is 4:30 on a Friday before Christmas break. And she just waved. She goes, "I'll see you next semester." And I said, "No, I have to leave. I can't afford to stay, but I'll be back." And she said, "What?" "Well, we need a coach in softball." She goes, "We need a pitching coach. Didn't you know that?" And I said, "Well, no, I haven't been a part of your team. I don't know that." "Well, coach is still in her office. Let's go." So we ran over across campus to the softball coach's office. And this is 20 minutes before the university closes down for Christmas break.
And the coach is still there. Amazing.
She's still there. Amazing, amazing. And I said, "Do you have an opening? Because I really need a graduate assistantship to stay." She goes, "Oh my God." You're like, "Yeah, I need a pitching coach. She just quit." So, long story short, that's how I got into coaching.
Okay.
And I was hooked.
So I'm trying to kind of get the season. So spring, you're coach with Michigan State.
Yes, assistant coach at Michigan State.
And when did your pro season begin? Did it overlap with the spring season?
Very little.
Mm-hmm.
Very little. So we were done there middle of May. In the pro season, we had to report by the third week of May to get going, and our season started 1st of June.
So dovetailed in pretty nicely then.
Yeah, it fit pretty well.
So did you do that 2 years in as a graduate assistant?
Yes.
Coach, assistant coach, I guess.
Yes, assistant coach at Michigan State for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I went to try to find a job. I mean, after I graduated, it was like, now what? It's all cool and dandy, but but now what? So I went to a convention where physical educators were, and started just filling out applications and putting them in the slots at this convention. And I noticed Oklahoma State had a job opening for teaching and becoming a softball coach.
This was in '78?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I stuck it in the slot. And then I saw the University of San Francisco had one for softball and a volleyball assistant. So I stuck it in the slot. Didn't know anything about volleyball, but I stuck it in the slot, And so I did that 5 or 6 times, and I would come back and check to see if anyone wanted an interview. And I really, really was interested in Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
Small town, that kind of thing.
So this is a conference now, and so they have these little boxes. So coaches were from those schools, or administrators were
Administrators
and checking their boxes periodically.
Yeah, and they could interview people right there. They had little interview rooms. And
do you remember who the OSU person was you talked to?
Susan Hall.
Susan Hall, yep.
Susan Hall. Now what happened was I never got an interview with her. She never responded. All my stuff was still in the slot. I'd put a new one in every day. I got the call from University of San Francisco, and they wanted to hire me on the spot. They just thought it was cool. I'd played the pro thing and all of that, and I did not want to live in downtown San Francisco. I was a farm girl. And so that to me, but I was like, well, this is the only job being offered because Oklahoma State has not responded. So I left there with a job, but I was devastated until I'm in the lobby, I'm packed, I'm leaving, and a friend of mine comes
This sounds familiar now. This is
yes.
20 minutes before school's out in the other job.
This is I swear on my mother's Bible, this is true. And a friend of mine grabbed me, and she said, I found the woman from Oklahoma State. She's over there checking out. And I was like, what? She goes, come on. So she's dragging me over and introducing us. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry I never got back with you. I meant to call you, and I was going to call you when I got back because your resume looks very interesting to us. And she had been spending most of her time partying. And so she was just going to take the information home and make the phone calls from here.
Yeah.
So
knowing Susan.
Yes, and after I got to know Susan, I totally understood it all. So she had been in the bars having some fun at convention, and I'm just dying to get an interview. Right. So anyway, she did call afterwards and did fly me in for the interview, the rest is history. But
Yeah.
I had to take a cut and pay from San Francisco, though.
Okay. So you came then after. So you went back home, I
Yes.
guess, or wherever to
Yes,
Michigan
back
State.
to-
Or back-
yes.
Okay. Then how long between the time you met Susan there at the conference till you come back for the interview?
Oh, probably a week or two.
So this would have been in the spring, summer of '70.
This was summer of '78.
Okay.
And I came in for my interview, and the job was for part-time teaching and part-time coaching. So I had to interview with Dr. Oberly.
So your professional season was over at that time then?
Well, I took some time
Took some
off.
time off.
They would let you do that.
Oh, okay.
So I come in for several days, and I interview with Dr. Oberly. And
George Overley, head of
yes,
the Health, Physical Education, and Leisure Sciences
yes.
Department. Okay.
And that part was very nerve-wracking to me because I had no teaching experience.
Mhm.
I mean, I only had coaching experience. And so I thought he pretty well held the key to it, which I think he did in the long run. But I think he felt comfortable enough after the interview that it was going to be okay. And then I spent my time interviewing on the athletic side and meeting the folks then. And
You remember some of the people you interviewed with?
golly, it was mostly Susan. It was mostly Susan, but Polly McCormick was there. She was one of Susan's secretaries. And then, gosh, I can't even remember. I'm having a blank. It was so long ago.
Was Dick Young there as athletic director at that time? But they
There was
weren't.
someone maybe before him, or maybe Dick was there.
But was anyone involved from the athletics department side, or was this all for HPLS side? Your interviews.
Mostly HPLS, mostly. And because I don't think the coaching part was that important to them at the time. I think the teaching was much more important. And I think athletics were just starting to gain some credibility for women on that side. And so, but it was interesting. We had no softball field at the time I was hired. We had an open field. We had no softball field.
I want to ask you about that, and let me back up and ask you, what do you remember about the structure? We're talking around the edges of it a little bit, but when you got there in '78, what was the organizational structure for women's intercollegiate athletics?
I think at that time it was just starting to split. It had already been planned to split, between athletics and the
HBLS, I think.
HPLS. Yeah, they were already planned to split. So I arrived during kind of the transitional year. My first office was over in the Colvin Center with PE. I taught over there. Everything I had was over there. And then the following year, I got an office over in Gallagher, Iva Arena, and we made the split. The offices were moved, etc. So it was really in that transitional time that athletics became its own entity.
Oh, but your first year there, was it still under HPLS, that '78, '79 season?
Yeah, they were transcending. They were
Transitioning at that time.
transitioning, yes, at that time.
Okay. What appealed to you about the position? I mean,
I'm sorry?
what appealed to you about the position? Because certainly we barely had a softball program, as I recall,
Right.
right? Or sort of a name only, played maybe a few teams around the state. But,
Sure.
So what
Sure.
appealed to you about the position?
What appealed to me was the community, was the fact that this was in Oklahoma, not that far from Illinois. It was rural, but it was a big-time school. And I was comfortable in this community. And the people I met while I was here were very warm and welcoming and very, very helpful. So I really enjoyed the people. That was a big part of it. And then the challenge of developing a softball program, that they were kind of at a point of, we're going to keep it or not keep it, or we're not very successful, we're not happy with where we are. And it was very challenging for me, and I like challenges, but on the other hand, I was scared to death. I had no clue if I had the know-how, because I was a pitcher. I had to learn how to teach all the other positions.
If you're going back to your previous part of our conversation when you were at Michigan State, you were just a pitching coach.
That's right.
And that's what you knew.
That's what I knew, and pitching's what I did. And so I had to learn footwork on a double play, and I had to learn hitting techniques, and I had to learn all of that. And I learned all of that by playing in the pro league and picking minds and brains and asking lots of questions from other people on the team that were already high school coaches or whatever, and then I would keep books and just, I would learn. I felt like a sponge.
And Sandy, kind of expanding on that, then you actually played one more season. You played in '79 with Connecticut Professional League. And so,
Yes.
so OSU season was over your first year.
Yes.
You played one more year of freshman ball.
Yes.
So that's what you're saying. You took advantage of that extra year to learn from
Yes.
the professionals.
And see, we were only on 10-month contracts here. So we weren't even paid in the summer. So I had to work in the summer. And when the pro league ended, it was like, what am I going to do for 2 months? And so I ran a fireworks stand for several years in the off season because I begged to be on a 12-month contract, but I didn't get one for 3 or 4 years.
Well, now, you said you took a cut in salary when you left as the professional team, and you're making $2,300 this summer.
No, I took a cut in salary by not taking the job in San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, do you recall what your starting salary was? Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, well, when I was a program director at the YMCA, that was $9,000 a year. $9,000. And then when I got the offer from San Francisco, it was $14,000. I was just like, wow, that's great.
What are we going to do with all this money?
What are we going to do with all that? But the cost of living was. So when Oklahoma State came along, they offered me $10,000. And master's required. Master's required $10,000 a year, 10-month contract. I was like, whoa. And so we negotiated and got it up to 11.
Oh,
So
tough negotiator.
So I started out at $11,000 master's required, but then after I signed my contract, I was just doing some research, and I had to deal with Gary Ward with baseball for practice facilities in the winter and stuff. And I said, so where'd you get your master's? I don't have a master's. He said, they don't require you to have a master's, and you make all that much more money than I do? This is a problem. So I got my feathers ruffled pretty early by what I was required to have versus the baseball coach.
Well, kind of give me where you were to the kind of the position, condition of the softball program you got there. I mean, so first of all, I guess they had a program, but they were playing a very limited schedule, playing pretty much teams around the state, some adjoining maybe, but limited schedule. So, and again, tell me about the facilities now where you play.
Well, when I got here, I asked Susan to drive me past the softball field. So she drives me past the corner of Duck and McElroy, and it's just a field. I mean, just dirt, grass. There's no structure. And she said, that is where your softball field will be. And I said, what do you mean, will be? And she goes, well, we don't really have one yet, but we feel that we will in a year. At least we'll have a skinned infield and a backstop for you in a year. It's like, what? She goes, well, we couldn't skin it because we also had women's field hockey playing there. And so, and I said, so where does softball play? And she said, well, it's at a city park. So we played at a city park, but we didn't schedule any home games really the first year. We went on the road. And so that's how that facility started. And our budget to build a new softball field, the original softball field was $40,000, which was huge money at the time, which gave us 2 dugouts, if you want to call them that, and a backstop. And that was pretty much it. We had one set of temporary bleachers that we would move in from other sports.
Was that in the same location where the permanent stadium is now?
Yes.
Well, Sandy, let me just kind of stop and maybe kind of move sideways and back. I want to get back to the question about what do you, when you arrived, it was really a transitional period for women's intercollegiate athletics. As you indicated, they'd been in College of Health, Physical Education, the Department of Physical Education, HPLS, Health, Physical Education, and Leisure Science.
Yes, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, but anyway, then you're, and so at this point we were transitioning into under the umbrella of the athletics department. I'd like to ask you, a couple of questions along those lines, if you don't mind.
No,
your
that's
thoughts. What was the administrative status of women's sports relative to the athletic department? So Susan Hall was you're under HPLS, and then you had an athletic director for women, And that was Susan Hall.
Yes.
So the coach reported to Susan. Okay. Question I have is, when this was happening, so I guess the transition was in 78, 79, 79, 80, those couple years was the transition under the umbrella of the athletics department. What was the feeling, how did coaches, supporters of women's sports feel that time about transition from HPLS to Intercollegiate Athletics Department?
I was so young and didn't know the other coaches that had been here already established. Really didn't understand their feelings or know them. I was just trying to learn my sport and figure out how I was going to coach this group of kids.
And where your fields are going to be.
Where my field was going to be and all of that. And so what I remember is that, the AIAW was a very strong organization for women's athletics. And then we had the men over here, the NC2A, and that there was animosity about the NC2A. You started hearing all the rumors how the NC2A wanted to take over the AIAW and bring all the women over under NC2A. And the AIAW people were very, very progressive and were doing a very good job with their Association for Women. And in fact, we had 15 scholarships under AIAW. And then as we're getting closer to getting absorbed by the NC2A, the rumor is we're going to go in our sport, from 15 to 11. To me, it's a total road backwards. And that so being absorbed by the NC2A, I didn't see as a positive at all. I didn't see it as a positive at all. And the AIAW, the women involved in coaching at that time, were very anti-NC2A. A lot of them were, not all, but a lot of them were, because the NC2A kept throwing you the bones. We can pay for your travel to the championships. We can do this, we can do that. But to a lot of us, it was a slide backwards at the time.
Kind of breaking it down into two parts. Say locally at Oklahoma State University, moving from HPLS to the Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. Dick Young was hired as athletic director I believe in August of '78, about the same time you were getting there. And many people felt that one of the reasons Dick was hired because his experience when he'd been at Bowling Green University's previous job to merging the men and women's programs under the umbrella of the athletics department. In your opinion, how supportive was he of women's sports, and was he effective in managing that merger, do you think?
Well, you're talking to someone who was quite young and quite at that point in time. I thought equality should abound. I did. I felt like my program should have equal access to a lot of things. I think Dick Young probably overall did a better job than what I remember. I only dealt with him with my sport. And I thought we coulda, woulda, shoulda had more. For example, I needed an assistant coach right away. And I wanted a small stipend, a graduate assistantship, something to hire an assistant coach. And he said, well, Sandy, and I'll never forget this, I guarantee you that there is a volunteer in this community, a housewife or someone, who would give you that expertise and assistance for free. Okay? Well, let me just tell you how that set in my soul. I mean, I really, seriously, I'm looking at baseball, who doesn't need a master's. He's got 2 assistant coaches. He's, and you're telling me to go get a housewife? So we probably got off on the wrong foot. But on the other hand, he did say, if you are successful, then, at some point in time, very soon, we'll be able to substantiate your needs, get you a full-time assistant coach, et cetera, et cetera. So it took time.
How long did it take to get that assistant? 2 years?
Several.
You brought him, was that when Margaret Rebinar?
Yeah.
You played with her in the professional league, is that right?
Yes, and Margaret and I had been teammates, and she came for $3,000.
Wow.
And was a part-time assistant. And then we finally got her bumped after 3 or 4 years up to 9,000 3/4 time so she could get benefits. So in all actuality, it probably took 5 years, 6 years to get a full-time assistant.
And you talked about something where there's some noticeable changes in the sports program immediately after the merger that you could, on a positive note, that you can refer to?
Well, I didn't know the program before because I was in the transitional year. So my point of reference would be different than another coach that actually was here several years before the transition started. All I know is we didn't have a big budget. We didn't travel far. And I knew that if we were going to be any good, we were going to have to get out and compete. And I didn't know how we were going to do it. If we may not eat well, but we were going to have to travel, drive the vans, and get to some competition because you can't get better unless you compete. And so that was my main focus.
I'm getting an inkling of this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, were the women's programs stronger, after the merger? Now, I'm not talking about 20 years down the road, but even say 3, 4, 5 years later, were they stronger after the merger, do you think, than they were before?
After the merger of the men and women's athletic departments?
Athletic department together.
I think probably they were, in a way, because we were now merging resources and we were now getting different sets of expectations about winning, and you can't win unless you are supported in some way, financially, scholarships, travel, that kind of thing. And so there was some more of that came along, probably. But the AIAW was an extremely competitive association. So I always saw them as very, very progressive. I always kind of saw the NCAA as the enemy of women because we're doing really well over here. But I think the NCAA feared the AIAW was going to grow into an entity that would challenge them or be bigger than them in some fashion. And they wanted us all under the same umbrella.
I want to come back to that, but I want to ask you a follow-up question about the merger. Is after it took place, was there more interest in enforcement of Title IX, or do you feel like the merger and bringing the two together, folding together, whatever you want to call it, I'll say merger, use that word, okay, but bringing the women's intercollegiate athletic programs under the umbrella of the athletic department with the men's sports, what do you think was the impetus for that? Was that more Title IX, or was there other issues involved in that decision? I mean, what was the force behind that merger?
I think the force was separating athletics from the educational side, the teaching and that kind of thing. This is an entity over here. We have our sports teams, and we're going to, have a department that services our sports teams. The educational side, the academics, the health side, the athletic trainers, that kind of thing. We're going to have an entity here. We're going to have to raise money through football and basketball. And so our focus became athletics because we were athletic teams, separated from the educational side of teaching.
So how did say George Overly and HBLS and some of the other administrators, so you think they viewed that as a positive thing?
I do.
To spin off, if you will,
I do.
collegiate sports into.
Yes, because they could both now focus on really what their priority was instead of trying to, try to merge the two. And I don't know if there are any departments left that were merged. University of Arkansas was merged until recently, still. And I don't know at what point they finally separated, but it took some schools a very long time to separate. So I think it was a progressive move to separate, and at the time we remained AIW and NC2A. We still got to function in our own little worlds and entities before the merger completely to NC2A.
Well, kind of back to the Title IX question, thinking about Title IX on a larger scale than just OSU, but nationally, what would you say has been its legacy, and is it fulfilled its expectations for its original proponents? What do you think?
I think Title IX is still a work in progress. I think that for us, until we challenge some things by using the law of Title IX, athletic directors were still wanting to give you as little as possible to be successful, because it was an investment, and we didn't have a lot of money in a lot of situations. So as you went down the pecking order, women's basketball was always held in high esteem. Athletic directors always took women's basketball, and it was the example. So they got the money, they got the full scholarships, they got the higher salaries, and then the rest of us kind of split this little pot over here. And I don't know why it was that way, but it was that way. And so when Title IX came along, it wasn't just immediate that we started. And then Title IX got challenged in the courts, and so it gave athletic departments the ability to not really keep investing vigorously because we didn't know if the law was going to be overturned. And so there was this lull, you know, in the early 80s. It was like, is it really going to happen? And do we really have to go by these standards? And so there was a lot of foot dragging during that time until it was challenged and upheld. So that became a turning point for us.
And of course, obviously, a lot of progress has been made in the last, few years. Is there still work to be done, in your opinion?
I think there is, but I think Oklahoma State is doing well. I think on a national scale, there's lots of work to be done, particularly in the smaller schools, high schools, that kind of thing. I don't think there's equity at all in a lot of those situations. We had recruited a young lady out of Alabama, and her father had done some Title IX work. He was a lawyer. And so when she came onto the team, he was in my ear like this. I mean, it was like, there's facilities, locker room, equal time in the weight room, the time of day you have to practice in the winter versus baseball. I mean, just salaries. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And he's like, Sandy.
Sandy, perspective asking how, the women's coaches felt about, going in. How did the men feel about, the coaches and men's sports supporters of the men's programs? How did they feel about merging the women's sports program?
I doubt very well. I doubt they liked it because there's a boys club and there's a way of doing in men's athletics. And women were feeling very good and independent over here with the AIW. And they felt like they got swallowed up by the old boys club. And so there was a little bit of angst anyway. And when the NCAA took us over in 1982, it was transitional for a couple of years. And there was some angst, and there was...
So the question I had is, did the women's sports have a choice in moving to NCAA, or was it was kind of a shotgun wedding? Their choice, they're going to NCAA.
And
who was pushing? I mean, was it locally? Was that national?
That was national. Mm-hmm. That was national, and the AIAW did sue the NCAA because the NCAA started setting up rules, and that they were forcing athletic directors into deciding: do we keep our women under AIAW, or do we take the carrot that the NCAA is giving us and put our women's sports in the NCAA? So they were offering some incentives for the athletic directors to bring their women's sports out of one association into the other. And the AIW was suing the NCAA for infringement or for that luring away. And the women's sports didn't want to be lured away, but the athletic directors were forcing us from this association to that association.
Did all the teams make the transition at the same time? Or,
yes.
So it was collectively across the board and nationally?
Yes.
In 1982?
Well, it wasn't across the board nationally. I mean, the transition happened, but the NCAA said, you have to make a decision. You're coming with us, and it starts in 1982. Okay? Or you're not, and you stay with AIW, or there's so few left that decided to stay with AIW that the association collapsed. It could no longer fund itself. And so, this administration at Oklahoma State decided we were going NCAA. So we had a transition year, which was 1982. In championships and everything else, we were one of 2 teams, I think, only, that qualified for both national championships. AIW.
In 82?
Yes.
So you went to both, you played in both tournaments?
Yes. They were back-to-back. Mm-hmm. And we were in the national championship against Texas A&M in the AIW national championship.
the finals.
Yes.
Wow.
In fact, winning, going into the 7th inning with 2 outs and lost.
Oh.
Painful.
Oh.
Come home, wash our uniforms, and get on the bus and go to Omaha for the very first NC2A Women's College World Series.
So you played in the last AIW and in the championship game at that, and then played in the first women's College World Series
in a 10-day span.
Wow. That would have been kind of exciting time.
It was wild.
Oh, I can imagine. Wow.
Yes, it was wild. So, interesting.
Did you, were you active in AIW, in the committees, or softball, or were you part of it?
I was on a selection committee, one of the selection committees to help decipher who qualified for the championships and that kind of thing. I was a representative for our Midwest region for that.
So the question I guess I was trying to ask there is, if you had a chance to know both organizations, were there some philosophical differences in principles of the two organizations, and if so, could you kind of describe those?
Well, I think that the AIW, being driven by very strong progressive women at that period in time, and the Title IX, and feeling very bold because of the law, etc. I think the thinking and the overall aspect of the AIW was much more progressive for women. When we went to the NC2A, then we felt like we took a step back because we had fewer scholarships, and yet we had higher money was given to us, better money for travel, and that kind of thing, but we lost our athletes. So we had to tell 4 athletes, see you later, because we don't have a scholarship for you next year. And so we had to make some very painful decisions in that transition for our kids. And so we felt like we kind of went back a step. But it's come a long way. I think the NC2A has become very progressive.
Was there other, I'm just trying to characterize this, not this way it was, but was there differences? For example, did the AIW put a little more emphasis on scholarship principles as opposed to maybe just winning and money? Or, I mean, what were the perceived differences like the two organizations?
Well, we were trying at that time as an association, just like the NC2A had gone so far forward with the men's sports. The AIW was trying to do the exact same thing for women's sports. TV, very progressive championships, and large numbers of scholarships to give more kids opportunity to play. And so we were trying to do very progressive things, and bringing up the rear, we're having to do them later than the NC2A. They've been in existence forever, and the men's sports were already pretty much out there, the big ones, and getting all the press. And so we were trying to come along and expose women nationally by television and by championships and sponsorships and things like that. So
was there any immediate impact on, so scholarships was one impact on changing under the umbrella of the NCAA? Was there any other immediate effects, benefits, good, bad, from the merger that you recall?
I think the number one worst impact was the scholarship. All of a sudden, we felt like our hands were really tied on getting good, exceptional numbers of quality athletes on a team. So that part was very painful from a coaching standpoint. However, we did see a budget increase, not dramatic, I would say 10%, maybe 20% in some cases, for our travel. But I can remember sitting at a coaches meeting, and we were talking about Title IX, and we had all the head coaches. And I remember football was there, basketball, all the male and female coaches, and we were supposed to give somewhat of a little report on our team and how this transition was helping us or not. And I can remember giving a report on my team, and I was trying to explain to them how we travel. We travel by broken down vans. They just kept telling me, they just kept on running, and no matter how we got there, we got there, right? We came home in more than one vehicle that we shouldn't have ever even been in. But, the budget was the budget.
Sandy, you were telling a story about being at the convention, talking about some update on Title IX.
Yes, well, I was actually at a coaches meeting here at OSU, and we
Okay,
had all the
coaches.
head coaches of all the sports, and we had to give a report on our little team and how things were going and Title IX and all of that. And I can remember one segment stood out in my mind where I was explaining to all of the coaches, and really in a dramatic fashion, because it was dramatic for us, that when we went out on the road and traveled, that we had $1 for breakfast to feed our team per kid, and we had $1.50 for lunch and $2 for dinner. And that was our per diem that we spent on these kids. So we oftentimes went without breakfast so that we'd have enough to feed them for lunch and for dinner. And I can remember Pat Jones, football, just looking at me going, "You're not serious." I said, "I'm totally serious. Here's our budget. We've cut it among these many kids per trip. That's what it comes out. And that is our reality." And he could not believe it. He looked directly at the athletic director and he said, "That's criminal." He said, "That's not right." And so I think there were just so many people that were ignorant of what the women were used to, what they were enduring, and until we actually got some serious relief. And I had gone in year after year after year with budgets and said, "We need this, this, and this." And "But your travel budget's the same as tennis." And I said, "So take 5 or 8 kids and divide it into that number for travel, and then take 20 people that we travel with the staff and the coaches, or the players and the coaches, and divide it into the same number and see what you get." And it was at that point that there was a dawning of the age that really our budget should be bigger because we have more people. And so it's just very simplistic things that needed to be better thought out, I think, over the years. And they were, and things did get gradually better.
Sandy, moving back to discussion about the Cowgirl softball team, okay? and it can be kind of focus on those early years. I'm thinking 78, 9, 80, 81, 82, you know, first 5 years or so, those first transitional and struggling kind of years. What do you remember what the program budget, your total budget was at that time?
Jeez. I'm thinking my first budget for everything, $15,000-$20,000, 25 maybe, but that was no. I think it was 35 with salaries.
With salary, so
Yeah.
that was
Still
11 for yours, and so still left up there.
Yeah.
It's the math.
And my housewife assistant.
You're right. But that was free, remember?
That's right. But yeah, it was very low.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when I got here, I inherited uniforms, so we already had that expense taken care
Well,
of.
it wasn't the basketball uniform.
It wasn't, no. We had the Astro orange striped uniforms with it.
And did you wear the pants?
Yep,
As opposed
we
to
did.
shorts? Is that your preference? I mean, you like?
No, that wasn't my preference, and at the time, it wasn't the girls' preference either. Although it is the girls' preference today to wear pants because they're more aggressive sliders and that kind of thing.
That's what I always thought about. I look through shorts, when they slide, oh my
Oh
God.
yeah,
Ouch.
painful. But we did. We had the knickers. Yeah, it was interesting.
So did you have, and when you first came here, not when you got into NCAA, but how many, you had 14 scholarships?
15 for.
15, pardon
Yes,
me.
for the
Paid
AIW.
scholarship? I mean, but was the university paying for those? It was in your budget?
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
So if you paid for your scholarships, you
Right.
paid for your salary,
Yeah.
that's why you're down $1
Like,
for
think
breakfast.
that much. Yeah, we had great kids, but we couldn't go anywhere.
Uh-huh.
And so we were actually quite fortunate. Actually, when I very first got here, we only had the funding for 12, and by my second or third year, they had upped the funding to 15. So we were fully funded, but it took a couple of years after I got here to get that. And yes, so we had actually the state of Oklahoma had some very good softball, and the very first thing I did was rob OU's #1 pitching recruit, and it caused quite a stir, and I didn't rob her, I just talked to her after she'd already committed to OU. I mean, I was brand new on the block, I didn't know anything.
And who was it?
Nancy Teehee.
Okay.
And she was a very good pitcher. And so we got her to come on campus and talk, and she had heard that I'd played in the pros and was a pitcher, and that was all exciting to her. And so we got her all committed, and then she hurt her knee playing basketball in high school for senior year. And she still came and was a very good pitcher for us, but that knee injury really took it out of her. It changed her a little bit. But the OU people, Marita Hines, I mean, mad.
There's already bad blood there, and that really seemed to.
Yeah, so, but we had very good athletes here, actually. Very good.
You'd mentioned earlier in terms of your scholarships. How did they compare with, say, compared to baseball, maybe your counterpart in terms of scholarships? How many did that?
We have always had more than baseball because baseball's always been NC2A. So they were at around a 9-point or a 10-point something scholarships when we were at 11. When we came in at the 11 scholarship mark, we still had more than baseball. And which was interesting because they couldn't cut us below 11 because they had already taken us down from 15 to 11. And so, and we couldn't go below baseball. I mean, it was like 2 blows if we went below baseball. So they always kept us just a couple of tenths above.
And did you have, was softball a equivalency sport?
Yes.
Because you could parcel that out so you could have
Yes.
more than 11 people getting aid, but you could only
Yes.
total 11 full
Absolutely.
scholarships.
Absolutely.
Tuition.
Yes. And for a while, we could only have so many in-state, so many out-of-state, and then you pooled that money and you could split it accordingly. So you got the money of X number in-state, X number out-of-state. We eventually transitioned over to the money of all out-of-state. So we had a bigger pool of money to work with for athletes.
So we were talking about facilities earlier, and I want to go back and revisit this. Your first year, you didn't play any home games.
No.
78, 79,
No.
no home games. Because you didn't have a place or you're too embarrassed to.
Right, and our recreational facility was really poor. I mean, it really wasn't well kept, and our maintenance people really weren't allowed to take care of it, and so it was a slow pitch dimension, and it was just a hardship for us to entertain teams at home. So we went on the road.
How did you do practice then?
Well,
where
we
did you
practiced at the facility here
Ducking
in town,
and,
over and out on Airport Road. Those fields out on Airport. Yeah, we got to practice.
Right crossing the golf course.
Yeah.
Wow, that had to be tough to kind of overcome.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So
But when we did get our own field, we thought we had died and gone to heaven because we could go right there on campus every day to our own field.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, that had to be a huge benefit for your program. That was done in a couple phases. Can you kind of share how the softball stadium project had evolved?
Right. Our softball field, like I said, started off very bare bones. We had the skinned field, and we had no permanent fence in the outfield because they still wanted to play some field hockey on our field. So we had a temporary fence. We had a backstop. We had temporary bleachers. That was it. They would bring in a porta potty for the season. But other than that, we didn't have any facilities. So our facility, we kept adding things like a press box and a concession stand, and we finally got a permanent bathroom added, and then they decided at one point that it was time to actually have a stadium, because all over the country schools had softball fields. And then Fresno State and the University of Arizona both built stadiums. And the verbiage had never been used in our sport, always in baseball stadiums. And now we're saying softball stadiums, and it was foreign language because we never ever had anything that was a stadium. And then the Amateur Softball Association, located in Oklahoma City, built a stadium where the College World Series is played now on a yearly basis. So once these were starting to crop up, it then became the big deal because of Title IX, etc., to start building softball stadiums around the country to equate to the baseball stadiums, the equity of baseball, softball.
Facilities war here.
The little facilities war with Title IX, for sure.
So how did you get the funding for your stadium?
Well, that was up to the athletic director. You know, I didn't have to fundraise it, etc. That was his job. And I know to facilitate some of it, he actually had a football game played up in Kansas City between us and Nebraska. And I know the funds from that game helped finish our project, because our project, every time, I mean, you look at it, the money goes up to what it costs to build it. It started out at a $1.1 million project, ended up at $2.1 million project, which today isn't much. But he had to find that extra money, and he was progressive enough to use some funds from the football game.
In those first years, can you talk about how your schedule changed? Because you're talking when you first came, you were playing did you play in the fall at all at that time?
Well, we were allowed to play in the fall. We were allowed to play X number of games, and you could have a certain number in the fall that actually counted toward your win-loss getting into the
really?
World Series under the AIAW.
Okay.
Okay, so we did play about a 12-game, 15-game fall, and then played the rest in the spring.
But your first spring season, how many games did you play? Do you recall?
20, 25 maybe.
Where they play 40 or 50 now. I mean.
Oh yes, 50 some.
And so, when you started expanding your schedule, then what say your second, third year, did you increase the number you were playing?
Yes.
Games.
Yes. What we increased the number of tournaments we played in.
Okay.
Because there was a formula where one day of a tournament, no matter how many games you played, only counted as one game.
Okay.
So there were some formulas in place that would allow you to play more games than you were actually really allowed. And so we decided, we went on a tournament tear. I mean, we started hosting tournaments. We would drive to New Mexico, to Texas, to Illinois. I mean, we drove anywhere we physically could get in a day and go to tournaments and play as many games as we could, and then drive home. And wow, we traveled forever. And the coaches drove the vans and the kids slept. I mean, it was dangerous. But we did that because we wanted to compete and get better and get national exposure, and it helped us in recruiting when people would see us play. And then all of a sudden, well, geez, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years into my coaching, we finally decided we needed to do a trip by air. We needed to fly.
Wow.
And our first trip, we flew into Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it was snowing. So I'm thinking as we're landing, all this money, we finally get to fly, and it's freaking snowing. So, but it stopped, and we played.
You had the long pants anyway.
Yeah, we had the long pants, that's right.
Well, we're talking about you travel, lodging. You're explaining 4 or 5 rooms in the early days. Did that start getting a little bit better for you, or kind of what kind of places were you staying?
It did start to get better. We still had 4 to a room, but we were staying in better motels. You know, the Roach motels were behind us now, and we were moving up a little bit. We left more than one motel in my lifetime because of insects.
You serious? So bad you got up and left? Where was that?
Oh Lord, somewhere between here and Iowa.
You're trying to forget it, right?
Trying to forget, yeah. And then we eventually got to a point where it was mandated by the administration that we go 2 to a room. Just, there had been enough lawsuit things going on around the country that, we got to the point where we didn't drive vans anymore. We went by bus because of safety, and 2 to a room for equity.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, whew.
The clouds.
Yeah, we were like,
rolled away,
wow, this is how they've been doing it forever. This is cool. Yeah.
Well, along the same lines, how extensive were women's sports covered? Again, I think it was early years, right there, late 70s, early 80s, and was OSU's, for example, media coverage in Stillwater, Oklahoma City. Tell us what kind of coverage did softball get? You're laughing. I think I got the answer.
I think I was not well liked in the sports information department because of my insistence that we get some reporting. And it became a sore point because what was happening was it would go into the newspaper that people would read at 5 o'clock that day that we played at 2 o'clock. And so we were expected to have crowds. We were expected to try to get people to come to our games. But my contention was there was never anything in the paper saying that we're going to play tomorrow night. Please come out and watch us play, or a schedule of any sort public, other than the little, little schedule cards that have been handed out in the community. So we had some go-arounds about that. It's that it was too little too late. And so let's make it worthwhile, and so give us some coverage, and then at the end of the article say when we play again, and
hopefully a day in advance.
Hopefully a day in advance. And I went to the Stillwater News Press and I asked them to actually print, which they're doing now, which is awesome. But years ago, just print a schedule of what's coming up this weekend. Softball 2:00, baseball 2:00. So that people have the opportunity, and they do that now, and it's quite helpful. I know I read it all the time. So I just think we needed more.
Well,
Sure.
After your conversations, did they sign someone on the sports information director's staff to cover?
We always had a student.
Mm-hmm.
A student was assigned to us to cover, and a lot of them did a good job, and sometimes they traveled with us, and they did as much as they were allowed to do. So I had no issue with the students. They took some interviews and things, and then the coaches, we were supposed to, report back to sports information after the games to let them know who won, who lost, have a comment, that kind of thing. And then if there was room in the paper, they would get us in. So.
Did you ever do any sort of write any of the material yourself and
Oh, no.
get it in?
Never did that.
Okay.
Never did that. They wouldn't let us do that. But no, we all got along in the end, but I was a little bit of a bull in a china shop early on.
Well, let's see. Leads me to my next, probably not so smart question, but do you feel that, when you started those early years, that you had adequate resources to be successful?
Oh, boy.
Define adequate resources, right?
Yeah, define adequate resources. I think at that moment, I didn't really know what other schools had. I didn't really know what we didn't have. And so I was focused on coaching our kids and trying to be winners, whether we played 20 games or we played 50 games. So I was really focused on that. And then as I grew as a coach and started learning what other people had and started talking to other coaches around the country, etc., I realized that our department, and this is what I liked about Oklahoma State, we were very successful as a department on very little money. We weren't OU with a blank check. We didn't have great football teams funding us. We always had some pretty good basketball. And I think for a long time, the overall sports program did really well on really not very much money. And to say that we could do that on a national level, I'm very proud of that. And particularly with our sport, we did a lot on very little. What happened then was that became the philosophy. And that you've done so well on so little, why should we give you lots more? Because, and so it almost came back to bite you a little bit, and we had to get through that. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Sure. And I think probably in later years, T. Boone Pickens, influence and understanding for the entire university and fundraising. We have to start thinking bigger. And I think I saw something in the athletic department, as you said, started realizing if we're going to be big time, we're going to be in the Big 12 now. Right. We're going to have to upgrade our facilities. We're going to have to increase our budgets.
Right. But when you have a huge shift in finances, you can have a huge shift in attitude. And so the early years, the kids were extremely passionate. And not so much the early years. I'd say most of the years I coached, our kids were extremely passionate about winning. They wanted a little better motel, and they wanted to travel better, and they wanted some better things. But if you give them too much, the passion wanes, and it becomes about how much stuff they can get, how many practice uniforms, and how many pair of shoes do they get to keep, and and it was always about, now we were thinking more in terms of more stuff instead of just the internal passion of the game. And that was a piece that I was saddened by. I was saddened to see that. And I think it's true today. I think a lot of kids do base their decisions on the coolest stadium and, and their travel schedule. And do we go to Hawaii, and do we, do a lot of things that I think will be cool outside of just playing the sport because I love it.
Between the lines.
So.
Did you feel? How did you feel about administrative support within the athletic department? I mean, were there sometimes resources weren't there? Did you feel like they cared about your program, or not? Or, I mean,
That depends on which part of my coaching career we were in. One of the hardest moments for me was, and I forget what year it was, I think it was early 90s maybe, not really sure. But first day of the school year, put my key in the door of our locker room, opened it up, looked in it and went, "What's that?" Shut the door, looked at the number and make sure it was there, put my key back in the door. And we didn't have a locker room anymore. They had broken down the wall and converted our locker room to enlarge women's basketball. So what I was looking at was women's basketball's locker room with the big TV and the couches and the little wooden beautiful lockers and things. And softball no longer had a locker room. And I can't tell you the smoke that came out of my ears at that moment. I was so angry I could spit. I'd never been told, I'd never been asked. I did get one question at the end of the earlier school year. "Do you use your locker room very much?" I said, "Well, on rainy days for meetings, but mostly we meet at the field." That was it. And they took that wall out and took our locker room, and I was livid. And so we had some issues that we had to fix. And that's really one of the things that got us really interested in creating a list of Title IX things that we were demanding. We weren't asking anymore. We were starting to demand because at that point I felt we took a huge step backwards. And so we spent a couple of years getting it right. After that, I think we did have administrative support because they really understood how important it was to us to have our own space and our own entity. And so some things did happen that shouldn't have, but they got corrected. So we're good. We were good.
Speaking of resources, Sandy, were you encouraged to participate in fundraising? I know you and I did some of that back in the day.
You betcha.
But in some areas, some sports, some schools, that you sensed that they didn't really want the women's sports programs to be out there fundraising. Right. Were you encouraged and supported your fundraising?
Yeah, we were expected to raise about 10% of our budget. Okay. And so we were out doing a variety of things. We would play a 100-inning game against OU, and the kids would have to go out and give pledges. We sold programs at basketball games and football games and helped in cleanups of the stadium. I mean, we did some things that a lot of the other teams did, some grunt work actually to fundraise. All that money went back into our budget or into our foundation that we could spend on things we really needed.
Can you imagine? I'm looking at that. I'm trying in my mind. I'm trying to imagine you looking at that softball field and you first got out there. But when you came here and you looked at facilities, you looked at the condition of the program. What were your early priorities for building the program? What did you feel had to be done to get to be a nationally competitive program?
We had to have really good athletes. We had to have a field to practice on that we could call our own, that we could access anytime, day or night. Those were the two priorities. So the very first thing I did was I had a promise when I was hired that we would have a field within a year. So I accepted that promise, and we did have a field within a year. So that was good. I didn't know which kids were on scholarships. So my first day, I held open tryouts. I'd advertised them, little ads in the paper and stuff, and we're having open tryouts and on campus. I didn't know who was on scholarship. And I kept what I deemed the best 16, 17 kids out of 90. We had 90 kids show up.
90? So
it took us 2 weeks to just whittle it down.
Did that ever surprise you that 90 showed up?
In the early days like that, no. Huh. You could have a tryout today and have 2 show up. I mean, it dwindled over the years. We held tryouts actually every year to get a good walk-on or two, and the numbers that showed up dwindled dramatically as the years went by. So I ended up cutting one of my players that was on scholarship, and I didn't know she was. And then I had an injury and brought her back. But it was really an interesting process, and the kids that we had were excellent, excellent athletes. And so whoever was here before, so I forget who was here right before me. I know her name, I just can't remember it. She had brought in some very good athletes from Tulsa and Oklahoma City on scholarship. And so I was lucky enough to start off with a pretty good talent pool.
What were some of your early goals for your program? Some milestones you said.
Yeah. We wanted to win our conference championship. And we wanted to do that really quick. We wanted to let the University of Oklahoma know and University of Kansas know. These were all really established, strong programs that here we're coming. You know, I don't know how fast we're going to get there, but we're coming. And so we really cleaned up the program as far as attitude and hustle and basic knowledge of the game, etc., and really found the passion in these kids. And I have to say, they bought in, because we finished, second in the Big 8 tournament the first year and won it the second year. I mean, we were on a path.
You're coming fast.
Well, I think it came from the Pro League, because losing wasn't an option in the Pro League. That was instilled in me by the legend, Joan Joyce, who was, you know, she was my mentor. And it wasn't emotional. It was just, losing's just really not an option. So this is what we're going to have to do. We don't have to practice long, but we have to practice smart. And I think part of that was really a good thing, in that we didn't have 5-hour practices and get bored and do that. We did what we had to do and we went home. But don't get me wrong, these kids like to party and they like to do their thing. But when they got between the lines, it was really important to them.
Well, speaking of some of those players, who were some of the key players that you recruited in those early years that you built your program around? Could you share some names and some experiences?
Well, the kids that came that I inherited were some of the best athletes ever. Dr. Jan Drummond was right here from Stillwater. She was our center fielder and our very first All-American. She was a slow pitch player and made the conversion very quickly. We had Pam Harper. You know, she was All-American several times from Tulsa. We had Tina Shell. She was a freshman pitcher when I got here from Tulsa, a very good pitcher. We had Nancy Teehee that I stole from OU. You know, we had Jan Krug, an awesome shortstop. Diane Van Fossen, an awesome second baseman.
So the cupboard wasn't bare when you got here.
No, and these were kids that had played against each other in high school and summer ball and things like that. And so for them to gel very quickly was pretty natural, because they were mostly all Oklahoma kids.
So who were some of your first recruits that successful?
Oh, geez.
Talking about TV, your pitcher, but others like that.
Sure. I mean, there was, we had so many All-Americans. We had, you know, Michelle Smith, who was on the Olympic team, and we had Jamie Fouch, who ended up being a 3-time All-American out of Edmond. And
is this in your early years?
Well, those were kind of the middle years.
The 80s,
yeah, they all kind of blend together for me, to be really honest with you.
I'm trying to remember too. What years did Smith pitch?
She was late 80s.
Late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
Yeah,
she's going into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame this fall.
That's what I heard. Yeah. She goes back and does commentary for the College World Series.
ESPN, and she played in Japan for 18, 19 years as a professional. And made well over 6 figures a year. I mean, she was quite successful in Japan.
Yeah, I heard they love that tall blonde-headed gal in Japan, didn't they?
Oh boy, yeah, but we've had, several Olympians go through our program, all of them pitchers. So we were always, the football has the running backs and we have the pitchers. So.
Sandy, you had an extraordinary 23-year coaching career at OSU, and because we cited some of those clips on those off the beginning of the interview. And I'd like to visit a little bit about that career. We sort of focused on the early years. Let's look at your total career and reflect back on that if we can, okay?
Sure. What would you like to know?
How did, over those 20 years, what changed in terms of training, techniques? What was different from the time you come in when you left? How did that change during that period?
Well, in the beginning, our coaching staff was pretty much in charge of everything, with the exception of we always had an athletic trainer for emergencies, a student usually. But we were in charge of creating a weightlifting program and, of course, practices and academics and trying to get kids with tutors and different things. And so early on, we were expected to do almost all of it. And as the years went by and the money came and things became more specialized, obviously, then all of those entities kind of spread out. You sent the kids to the guy that set up the weight program, and then they went to the training room separately, and they went to the academic services unit separately. And so really, the coaches became very focused on just training them in the softball skills. We would oftentimes have the track coach come and teach them proper techniques of running and explosion and those kinds of things. And during this very same transition, the kids are now getting private hitting instructors, private pitching instructors, and all of that happening in the summertime and as they're growing up in high school. So there's much more instruction.
Was this an impact of Title IX? So they were coming out of better summer league, particularly better high school programs, and because of that impact of Title IX in public schools?
Title IX may have impacted that, but I think it was more the parents realizing scholarship availability. I think parents were training their kids to get in line for a scholarship was the biggest impetus.
Kind of in their summer programs, after they saw there was some talents there, they looked to refine those.
Yes, and so the whole system kind of changed. The high school athletics kind of went out the window a little bit, and it was more the travel ball teams, because those teams would go to tournaments, and that's where the coaches would go recruit, where there were 100 teams instead of going to individual high school games. So the parents were paying thousands of dollars to put these kids on summer teams to get them to the tournaments, to get exposed. And see, that was another significant difference between AIW and NC2A, because under AIW, we could hold tryouts on campus, and we could invite kids from all over the country, and they could pay their own way in here to try out for a scholarship. Under NC2A, no tryouts were allowed on campus. They couldn't physically compete for us, so we had to go see them much more.
Was that a big shift in your career? Was recruiting and
Yes,
how you recruited?
very much so.
Could you talk about that a little bit? What it was like when you started to say that in your later years, and what was the typical, I want to say off season, but never really off season.
No, there wasn't.
The recruiting season. How did that change and evolve?
Well, it changed quite a bit when we could no longer hold the tryouts, because we could no longer say, well, you didn't come and try out for us, so we had to go watch. So we now had to have a recruiting budget, because we were physically going to be flying to California, going to Colorado, Texas, wherever the big tournaments.
Summer league tournaments.
Yes, travel ball tournaments. And the travel ball is where kids were very specific to playing a position. In high school, they might have been a great shortstop, but they needed her to catch, or they needed her, high school had needs. And so a lot of coaches stopped going to high school games to recruit. They all went out in the summertime. And then there started to be the big winter tournaments in Florida, California. And
National tournaments people come into.
Yeah, and so they were now having recruiting tournaments year-round. And so we were starting to go out year-round, where it used to be just, a month or two in the summer, you'd go out and see some tournaments, kind of, fly them in, give them a scholarship, and the parents were like, thank you, that's so exciting. Well, that changed. So, yeah, recruiting became a much bigger burden than the actual coaching of the team.
Sandy, how did you specifically, how did your training and practice techniques change over the years?
You had to keep up, because like any sport, techniques changed. And what we had was an influx of techniques from baseball, particularly in hitting. So it used to be that our techniques in hitting in softball, because it was so much faster, it was just shorter, quicker game. It wasn't a power game. And now it is a power game, because we've brought in we've integrated our hitting techniques with baseball. And so we have more of a power mentality now. as opposed to manufacturing a run with bunting and all of that. Still exists.
Short strokes.
Short strokes, right. So now we figured out, because we were getting bigger, stronger physically, that, and then the mechanics and all the new technology in bats and balls, all of them livelier. We now were gaining tremendous distance with our swings. And so our game changed to a power game. Pitchers became very, very specific. How you teach pitching techniques and to get, maximum velocity and spin and movement and things.
Did your practice become longer or shorter or more specialized?
Well, a little bit more specialized, a little bit longer, but we did most of our drill work indoors in the wintertime. But then we did a lot of strategic type of play and a lot of inter-squad scrimmaging and creating a lot of game-type situations. We did more and more of that to get them into the mental frame of competing under pressure. We would create pressure situations. So.
Sort of the same question, but a little bit different twist. How did your philosophy of the game change? And maybe the power game, you're talking about one thing, but how did your philosophy of coaching, teaching, training, how did it evolve and change? Did you think about when you started, which you'd had a couple years experience just as a pitching coach at Michigan State. So you start off as a green coach. How did your philosophy change from that time to the end of your career?
Well, I think what happened was we started to get responsibilities split up on the coaching staff. We were allowed to have 2 full-time assistants and a graduate assistant. So now we were dispersing, you're in charge of hitting and you're in charge of the infield and you're in charge of the outfield. So we each had more specificity, or however you want to say it. But we each took our thing and got very specific with how we would teach it. And then as a coach, you have to continue to be open to change and learning and going to clinics and at the national convention, really listening to other coaches, how they did things, pick each other's brain, and incorporate things. And softball coaches are very open about sharing ideas and things that work for them and something new. And you're always trying to get something new in practice, or it's just, after a while, it's just like, I am so bored. We have done this 1,000 times, So I think it was just a matter of consistently integrating new things and ideas to keep it fresh.
Well, how has, in your opinion, how's intercollegiate softball changed since you first started coaching?
The game is bigger, stronger, faster. The kids, they're better athletes. Some of them are better athletes. But I also think that our older athletes from years ago had much more passion. Their goal really wasn't the scholarship. Their goal was to be a winning unit. They really, really had a lot of pride in being winners and being together and having each other's back. I think that still exists, but I don't think it's as intense or as big a focal point. I think getting the scholarship is such a focal point growing up for these kids now that even sometimes they're burnt out when they get here. And so I think a little bit of that wanes. But the coaches, the older coaches, they still have the ability to instill that passion and that love for the game to keep them focused. It keeps you focused instead of all the stuff. But I think the parents are closer to the kids now. I think the kids with cell phones and text messaging, and I think there's a whole different line of communication between parent and child now. That's very, very different. Kids went off to college years ago and they were independent. They might call home once a week or check in, or maybe go home once a month, maybe, if they're close by. And now it's daily, multiple daily communications with parents and things, and how it went at practice, or how it went during the game, or how it, I didn't get to play, I didn't, So I do think technology has changed some of how the kids are, and it's not their fault. And the parents, they get a little nervous about getting the kids out of their sight. It's a dangerous world, and so it's just different. I think they're less independent, as much as they say they want to be more independent. In some ways, they're less.
Sandy, can you share some of the accomplishments of your teams over the years, some milestones for the Cowgirl softball program.
Wow.
I know there's been a lot of highlights there.
Been a lot of highlights. I would say the one thing I wish we'd have done that we didn't accomplish or haven't accomplished yet is win a Big 12 championship. We won so many of the Big 8 championships and so many in a row that when we merged with the Texas schools and went to the Big 12, we were not successful. We were successful getting to the championship, but we didn't win it. That's one thing I think that's a goal that has been missed so far.
How many times did you get the championship game?
In Big 12?
Big 12 play.
Just my last year. Just my last year. Coaching. I know, so close, yet so far. Oh, you won. You know, but we won lots of championships, and we had incredibly successful kids. When Michelle Smith was here, we were ranked #1 in the nation all season long, and should have been in the national championship, missed it by a pitch, you know, that kind of thing. And we could have won it that year without any question. We were the best team.
I've got to ask, where did you find Michelle? Is there a story behind how you?
There is a story behind that, and that involves Margaret Revenar. And Margaret, being my assistant coach, we got a phone call in the office one day from a softball camp out in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, looking for an instructor because somebody got sick at the last minute, and they had heard that we had done some other camps, and so I said I couldn't go, so I asked Margaret if she wanted to go, because it was extra money. Remember now, we were doing the fireworks stand. And so she
I had forgotten that.
so she said sure, and so she went and was an instructor at a camp in the Poconos, and Michelle was there. And Michelle was such a late bloomer. She didn't even start pitching till the summer after her sophomore year in high school.
Wow.
And only pitched because they didn't have one in her high school. And she loved her coach. Michelle was a first baseman. So she went to that camp specifically to learn pitching. And Margaret was a pitcher. So she was teaching pitching. And that's how that union happened. And so Margaret actually discovered her and came home and said, oh.
You're a diamond in the rough.
We got a diamond in the rough, and we need to get an out-of-state scholarship. We need to insist on it. So we recruited against Cal Berkeley, Cal State Fullerton, and some other schools to get her. And it was a tough get, because once people saw her, they saw her potential. She was extremely raw. She didn't really have a lot of pitches. She was just learning, and she was great. Michelle got a lot. She learned a lot at Oklahoma State. Trust me, she learned a lot, but she got so much better after she left, because she took what she learned and just developed it. She couldn't have learned everything in the 4 years she was here. She started so late. So she got her fundamentals here, and then just excelled, kept working on them.
Sandy, you mentioned that she played, 14, 15, 18 seasons in the Japanese League. Are there any, then and currently, are there any professional women's softball leagues in the U.S.?
There are two entities at the moment. One is called the NPF, which is the National Pro Fast Pitch League. And they have, I believe, 6 teams around the country, and they play each other. And it's a regular professional league based on the league I played in back in the 70s. They're trying the same thing. So they've been at that now for several years. They're just now starting to get some growth, because it's been individual owners versus corporate owners, which they have in Japan. And then there's an entity called the PFX, the Pro Fast Pitch Extreme Tour. And I coached on that tour for the last several years. And that's 2 teams go out into youth tournaments and put on clinics, and we do sessions about recruiting, and we do coaches clinics. And then our 2 teams play each other, and they're made up of Olympians, All-Americans, names that kids would know in the softball world.
Signing autographs.
Sign autographs till we're blue, and a lot of hands-on hugging and watching kids play and clapping for them, and a lot of interaction. And it's just kind of a neat deal for the kids to really rub elbows, and particularly when we were in the Olympics. These Olympians were very highly regarded and well received, and it was it was a fun tour. Now that the Olympians are no more, per se,
Is that a disappointment for you, to say
Oh,
the least?
horrible disappointment. It's an injustice because our sport was just blooming all over the world. And boom, that fast it's over. So it was really hard on
You're
them.
working to get it back, I hope.
Well, they're working, but so far, no luck.
Switching just a little bit on your players, over the years, were you satisfied with the academic performance of your players?
For the most part, you always had a couple. When you have a team the size of a softball team, there's always a couple. But we graduated between 90-95% of our kids.
Really, that
We
high?
were that high.
Wow.
And it was important because the number one reason they should be here is that we matched up in their academic interest.
It's great. I didn't realize that high.
Yeah, we were extremely high. And it goes hand in hand with success. Academic achievement is a whole other challenge. So it goes hand in hand.
Looking back over your coaching career at OSU, anything you change if you had a chance to do it differently?
Wow.
I know it's hypothetical, but you're just thinking back. And
It's hypothetical.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question because you coach as you go, and you do the best you can at that moment in time.
You're a different coach 10 years down the road than you were before.
Yeah, you are. I had the same assistant coach forever and ever and ever and ever, and that was probably, for most of the time, that probably added a great deal of stability. But then again, on the other hand, I'm not sure if we didn't stagnate a little bit because we were almost too familiar all the way through. So maybe made some, had some different sprinklings of different folks on the coaching staff might have been a good thing. But as far as the players and everything else, I think we probably could have hit a little more. We probably could have done a few better things at practice. We may have stagnated there upon occasion too. And over time, you can only do so much. But not so much. I think we were successful enough, and we had good chemistry on the coaching staff for a very, very long time, and we had really good players. We had 3 Olympians come through and lots of All-Americans. And when you have good talent, you can go a long way.
Good things happen.
Good things happen, yeah.
Good players do make coaches better coaches.
Maybe been a little closer to the parents. The parents they were always an entity that were background and maybe should have pulled them in a little bit more. It's hard to say. Yeah.
Sandy, are there some special moments, some special memories that you have there being for you during your OSU career, and can you share some of those with us?
Wow. I think being named National Coach of the Year was an overwhelming moment because it really wasn't just me. It was the coaching staff. It was always the players. And it was a magical year that we had.
And you're ranked number 1.
Yes. And so that to get that honor out of all the coaches around the country was quite overwhelming. Being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2008, after the whole thing was over for a long time, was really touching. It was really professionally very touching to be honored by your peers like that. So that was cool.
Sandy, your last year then that you coached last season was 2002, 2001.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was an interesting year. It was one of those years where we had some injuries and some different things, and we knew we were on the bubble NC2A wise, and we really thought we'd done enough by getting into the Big 12 championship that year to get us over the hump. And when we weren't selected to go to the NC2As, it just made the year really disappointing. It was sad. But we had other years where we didn't make it, but we made it most of the time, and so the years we didn't make it were really devastating because we were used to winning and going and continuing on and that kind of thing. And so, but after you do something over 20 years in your life, I think you get to a point where you almost get saturated with it, and And so it tends to wane a little bit. I think if you look at anybody's coaching career, it'll have hills and valleys and that kind of thing. And I think today athletic directors are allowing fewer valleys. I think they're under such pressure to win that coaches now live under a much different pressure than I probably ever did.
You must have taken a tremendous amount of energy and untold sacrifices, Sandy, on your part to build a nationally competitive and recognized program from scratch, truly from scratch, and keep it there for so long. What kept you going for those 23, 24 years? What was your source of strength? What kept you going?
I think the years ago that my mother instilled in me possibilities, that everything is possible. And I tried to give that to my players, that no matter what, no matter who you are, whatever, you're blessed to be here and to be a part of this team. And we're blessed to be here together at this moment in time. And if we pool our talents and our energies and our efforts, how far we go is endless. And it can take us all the way. And I think the kids, the majority of the time, really enjoyed testing their endless possibilities as a team and as individuals. And we weren't always loving each other. I mean, we had some teams that your boyfriends, and, but when they got between the lines and played together, they still performed really, really well because they loved the sport and they loved playing for Oklahoma State.
So a lot of your passions derive from seeing the development of the young ladies that you worked with.
Mm-hmm. I think my ability to inspire them was better than my ability to teach them how to hit, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
And I think sometimes you just have to tap a person's possibilities, and then they will bloom and they become easier learners when they want to learn. And they're willing to go further for you if there's a willingness to go forward. And I think probably toward the end that willingness changed. I don't know. I think I was burnt out. I think at some point you do just do the same thing. And I had a great tragedy in my family. I had lost 4 family members, my entire family, to cancer.
Your parents, your brother and
yes,
sister?
Yes, I lost my father, mother, brother, and sister.
Wow.
The decade before I ended my coaching career. It was ended. And so each time one of those tragedies happened, it took a little bit out of me. And by the time we got to the last one, which was my sister, and I was her primary caregiver during the active spring season, then, by that time, I think my energies were drained. My emotional energies, my ability to inspire, my, love of life and all of that, it just changed a little bit.
And you, as I recall, to take care of your sister, you had to step away for about 3 months, too, from the program.
Yes. And so the assistant coaches had to take over for 3 months while I was gone, right in the middle of the active part of going to tournaments and our season. So it was very hard on them. It was very hard on our players. And it was very, very hard on me to be away because I was totally torn. I mean, I really needed to be with my sister, but I really wanted to be with my
Then again, coming back, I mean, it had to be tough for you, but for Margaret and the other staff, because she's
very tough
she's
shift.
Finally, after all those years, got a chance to kind of lead, and then she's got to step back.
Sure.
And must have been tough.
It was a very tough shift. So for those, and that all happened several years. Well, that was like 98, 99. And so for those several years between there and 2001, it was just a real tough thing for us all to try to shift back and all of that. And the players probably got caught in the middle in that a little bit. And so it was just one of those things that just probably wasn't good for our program.
So when the year that your sister had to take care of her, finally she died, what year was that again?
98. That was 98. And that was our last time that we went to the College World Series. Yeah. So, life just presents a lot of different things. And one thing will affect another.
Speaking of that, Sandy, is there life after coaching? Or what?
Oh, Lord God, yeah.
Can you talk about some of your activities since you retired from OSU?
I miss OSU and I miss my salary. And of course I miss the kids and coaching, but I live on 40 acres and I have horses and so I'm partially retired. And yet, on the other half, I've done some coaching in the summers on the Pro League, and I work part-time for a little company that sells some products for our sport, and I'm an inventor. I've invented several training aids that are out on the market now.
Can you mention a couple of those?
Well, one is called a tee stacker,
Mm-hmm.
and really what it does is allows you to stack 2 or 3 balls on a standard tee, a hitting tee.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are properly on plane at contact when you hit the top ball, then it leaves and the tee stacker leaves and the next ball is ready to hit right away. However, if you're off plane and you're not swinging correctly or well, then it compresses the stacker and then the bottom ball will fall off. So you know right away whether you were on plane or not. So it's about quality of swings versus quantity, because you can get really bad habits off the tee. You can swing wrong 50 times and ingrain it in your mind. So it's to help kids get it right off the tee.
Practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect.
There you go. And then the most recent one out is called the hand tee, the precision hand tee. So it's a handheld tee, so the coach can put that ball at any point in the contact zone, in, out, high or low. They can move it on every swing. It can be in a different spot. So it's kind of a really cool entity too. So
you are involved in with that company that markets and promotes the product.
Oh yeah, I've got a book full of products.
So you do camps and you do work with coaches and.
I haven't done any camps of late, and I haven't really done much speaking of late. I have done some recruiting seminars. I've gone out into some of the communities in Edmond and different places and talked to parents about recruiting and what the coaches' side of it, so that they can understand what coaches are thinking. So, I keep my toe in it a little bit. Yeah.
So here's one of those really philosophical questions for you, Sandy.
Okay.
How do you hope people remember Sandy Fischer? I mean, thinking back on what you
Oh,
did.
wow.
I'm talking about players, coaches, people that have known you in your life and your coaching career. How do you hope people remember you?
That's a really interesting question. I hope particularly the players remember that I always had their good at heart, that they were a part of a group, and that my job was to guide the group. But along the way, I hope I had some personal influence, and I hope I was helpful to most. I know not to all. The poor kids that ever got cut from the team, this, that, or the other. I mean, there will always be some folks I wish I could talk to personally and say it was never personal. But I hope they remember me as someone who really wanted to help them move forward, not only as a player, but mostly as a person. And that's what I hope. But I don't know, competitive, fun, strong, humorous, cantankerous sometimes, but always with the right thing in mind for the end, that we were going to progress to a point further than they ever thought they could go. So,
Sandy, what do you do with the rest of your life? besides play with your horses.
There you go. I want to be happy. And I want to be happy to know that if I died today, I felt like I left some good behind here at Oklahoma State and with my family and friends. And I just want to live each day with sunshine in my heart, knowing that in the end, life really is good. It's a journey. And it's what we make of it. It's what we make of it. So.
I haven't asked that. Let me step back if it's okay and ask you a question. You struggled for so many years, you and coaches in women's sports. We talked about that earlier in our interview about equity, equality, equal pay, these issues. A really particularly contentious issue is, you alluded to, and I visited in another interview with Ann Pitts-Turner now, longtime golf coach at Oklahoma State University. That issue of equal pay has really been a sore spot, I know, for a lot of them. I want to ask you your perspective. Ann had, back in around 92, 93, in that era, lawsuit over that issue of equal pay, which she actually won. And I know it was tough on her emotionally to have to take that action against her school. She graduated from here in the school she loved. How important was the outcome of that litigation? And how did it impact you and the other women's sports programs here, do you think, at Oklahoma State?
When she first decided to do it, I was shocked because I knew the ramifications would be very, very strong. And I truly admired her and totally supported her in it. It was very personal for her, and she took a lot of slack for it, and some of it not very good from folks in the community, etc. And it was a hardship for her. And I don't think many people really realize when you sue the university how hard that is. It is hard. But she was one of many pioneer women around the country that were doing just that. Equal pay for equal work. And in the coaching world, if you are given the same number of athletes to coach and the same budgets and the same everything, and you come to work every day just like your male counterpart, then you should be paid. It's pretty simple. And there was great inequities that she was fighting for, and I was a witness at her trial. I was one of her witnesses and truly believed in what she did. And so when she won, it was a step up for all of us. You know, the athletic director talked to us very differently then, and some compensation came along the way, and all of a sudden we had contracts. We had no contracts. We were year to year, and if they were done with you, they were done with you. And so now we had contracts, and some people thought that was a real positive. Some people didn't, because then at the end of that contract, you were always reviewed and there was a decision to be made. Whereas if you were on year to year, it's kind of just if you're winning, things keep going and nobody thinks about it. Right. So there were people that thought that was a positive and that might be a negative. So there was good and bad. But ultimately, Anne created an environment where the athletic directors around the country, I mean, she was one of many, had to step up and say, you know, we haven't been paying them enough. And it's not right, it's not fair. And so she really was a pioneer, and she took it on the chin. And it was very personal for her.
And Sandy, I understand that there was 2 or 3 coaches that got some fairly significant adjustments in salary pretty quickly after she won that case. Is that right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some did. I don't think mine was particularly fast, but it was faster. It was on a much faster track. And mine was based on, and most of them were based on salaries of all the other coaches in your conference, and then top 20 teams. And they started doing some formulas to start basing it on, which was quite helpful.
So I hadn't thought in perspective. I think I hear you saying that they really made them, cause them to step back and look at their salaries based on some facts and really analyzing and doing contracts and a much more professional approach to it than it had been before.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So she was a pioneer for us, really, in this department. And I will forever be thankful and grateful that she did that, because it was hard on her. So, yeah, it was a great thing.
Sandy, again, thank you. I know it's been a pretty extensive interview. You provided some great information. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
And congratulations on just an outstanding career. Like I said, I'll finish where I started. I mean, you know, you're a legend in OSU softball.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be a part of Oklahoma State.
Sandy, one question. You know, after our sign-off question, I did forget to ask you. I know one thing that I'd heard alluded to in a couple of interviews that I'd done is that there was a question, maybe concern about as you look at women's sports at Oklahoma State University. There's only one women's coach right now in the program. How do you feel about that?
How much tape you got?
No. As long as you want.
Yeah. No, because of where I started here and because of the opportunity I was given, I feel very, very strongly that women coaches should be hired when at all possible to coach a women's sport. It's interesting because when the salaries were so low, men were not interested. And as we progressed, and this was actually predicted by the AIAW 30 years ago, predicted that it would come to this. that the salaries would get so good that the men would start to infiltrate the coaching ranks of women. I didn't believe it at the time. I totally believe it today. And I think there are many reasons for it. I think in our sport in particular, and I can speak to softball, we now have athletic directors that believe that if you played baseball in your history, you would transcend and make a very good softball coach. I think athletic directors sometimes also feel more comfortable dealing with men than they do with women.
Because most athletic directors are
Men.
men.
Absolutely. And I think there is an alliance there, whether they would admit it or not, I don't know. I also think that for women, if you lose a job as a woman, there must have been a reason, and it's really hard to transcend that and move on. If you lose a job as a man, then you're just a better fit somewhere else. There's a double standard in hiring and rehiring women, so it's a double whammy. Women cannot transcend and go coach in baseball, and so that door is closed. This door is closing that we have currently because more and more men are being hired. We used to be 90% female coaches coaching female sports. We are now below 40%. We are now between 30 and 40% women coaching now.
Sandy, I mean, is it because there's not an adequate coaching pool out there?
A lot of women, once out, stay out because they have fought the battles for so long that it wears them out, and so they stay out. Players are so burnt sometimes from playing their college career and having spent their whole childhood getting a scholarship, then playing, they drop out, and their interest in coaching has waned. The interest in coaching for women in the 90s was pretty high. I had lots of players asking to be student assistants, and I want to coach too, and tell me how to do it and where to go, and we had lots of interest. It has waned in this past decade because I think they also see the trend, but in some ways they're burnt out. And so it is an interesting thing that's happening. And philosophically, an athletic director has to take a stand and protect women's sports by at least having a member of a coaching staff or two, or the majority of the coaches on that staff should be women, because that's equity. And women play the sport their whole life. They should know what they're doing, and they should be given the chance to have that expertise rewarded. But we're moving in a direction where athletic directors truly believe the male coaches are the more successful coaches. And that's really hard for me to watch. It's really hard for me to watch.
What do you think it's going to take to break that trend? And again, I want to answer the question because I'm not sure that I got fully understood your question, but is there an adequate pool? I kind of hear you saying too that the pool seems to be decreasing, though, maybe women who want to coach.
It's decreasing, yes, because the opportunities are less. If we were committed philosophically to hiring women to coach women's sports, then the job pool is bigger. But the job pool is shrinking because more men are being hired. Not that male coaches are bad, I'm not saying that, but I think a staff should be a blend, a good blend. And I think that the head coach, when at all possible, should be hired. And I know athletic directors today are out there, and I know that they're saying, we hired the best person. So based on our interview group, we thought he was the best person, or she was the best person. But more often than not, it's a male. And what happens too is that they will give a male assistant coach an opportunity to be a head coach quicker than they'll give a female assistant coach the opportunity to be a head coach. And sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's cheaper to hire the assistant and do a head job, and I think this guy is better than this gal. But there is a philosophy of the athletic director that they themselves have. Is it important to try to maintain the equity of men and women coaches? Is that important to me as an athletic director? Is that important to the future of female sports? And to really understand deep down inside if it is or it isn't to that athletic director. The hiring practices then will show you that. That's my opinion. But a lot of times, I think in their mind, they're not that deep into philosophy. I think they're trying to find the best coach they can at that moment, or whoever's brought to them as the best coach. But I think when push comes to shove, the female should be given the opportunity. And if she fails, then replace her with a man. But really, honestly, it's really hard. I think we've gone backwards. I think we're going backwards in the hiring of women. And it's always interesting to see how many women are coaching at the World Series versus the male coaches.
How's that been in recent years?
We still have more women than men, but it's becoming more 50-50. And so there is this little shift, but and I like the guys. I know a lot of the guy coaches, and they're good people, and I'm not saying that they're not, but their tendency then will be to hire one female and one male a lot of times. And so you end up many staffs that are 2 male coaches versus 1 female. And it really should be the other way around. It really should be, if we're going to continue to progress and really open the door for more women to come into the coaching pool, because they feel stifled. Because you don't see many 60-year-old or 55 or 65-year-old women who can just jet off and get another career. I mean, there are men still coaching at the college level that are 80 years old.
Wow.
Definitely. Football, basketball probably. I mean, if you're 65, you're still young and coaching. If you're 65, you are so over if you're a female. It's so dumb. So there's inequities underlying, whether they'd be admitted to, I don't know, but that's just my personal opinion. But Oklahoma State needs to hire more women. We're very out of balance right now. And it doesn't bode well for us philosophically holding up the great attributes of Title IX. I mean, it doesn't show parents that, I want my daughter to go there because they really, invest in what's going on for her future. I don't know. I just think we really are we've got to come back to the center here sometime. There'll be a much more balanced department.
Appreciate it. And with that, we'll sign out. Thank you.
Thank you.